The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ilya.
Hey, Ben. How's it going?
It's going splendidly. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm extremely pleased to say that on this episode, I got to interview the creative team behind the new movie Catch the Fair One, which is excellent. It is really good.
I've been hearing really good things about it. I'm excited to check it out.
It is honestly my favorite film that I've seen in 2022. It's a knockout.
Setting the bar really high. We're 1 month in.
Well, I've seen a lot of movies, though. In fact, I just watched a bunch of stuff from Sundance. And
that's true.
This is like, I've probably seen 20 movies so far in 2022.
That's fair. That's fair. Actually, I wasn't factoring the Sundance thing in. That actually makes a big difference.
It does. Like, if I had just seen like this and like, Ernest Goes to Camp or something, sure, that would set the bar pretty low. But I've actually seen a lot this year. So
very cool.
Anyway, Ben, who are those people that I had the pleasure of interviewing?
You interviewed, if I'm not mistaken, Kali Reis and Josef Wladyka.
That's right. Kaylee is the star and Josef is the director. And Kaylee and Josef also co-wrote the thing together. And
oh, sweet.
It's one of those movies that I don't want to say anything. I don't want to tell anyone anything about it. It does involve human trafficking. I'll say that much. It involves human trafficking, which is like, that we're in for some darkness. It's a good interview. I really enjoyed talking with them. The movie's fantastic, and I really can't wait to see what they make next.
And that movie's actually coming out pretty soon, right?
I think by the time that anyone hears this interview, it will be out. It's out on VOD streaming platforms, I think wherever you can do a VOD streaming. And it's also in theaters, limited run in theaters right now. And IFC Films is distributing, and it's totally worth seeing.
I will definitely check it out. How are you feeling these days about going to see movies in theaters?
At least in Los Angeles, I'm actually really pleased that the positivity rate has fallen down to like 7%, which is really good. I haven't been to a movie in a theater. I watched all the 20-something movies I saw so far this year streaming. Well, with the exception of Spider-Man. I did go the one time, and that was enough to put me off going to the theater for a little while since it was just totally jam-packed. But I've talked to a lot of other people now who are going, and they're going at maybe less popular showtimes and stuff, and they're having a good experience. So, I haven't heard of anyone catching COVID at the theater. So
I haven't been to a movie since right before Omicron started, but I will say that literally last week I went to a concert.
All right.
I went and saw Sparks, in fact.
Nice.
I've frequently talked about on the show, and we talked to Jake Polanski, who shot the Sparks documentary, The Sparks Brothers. Yeah, and that was interesting because they required proof of vaccination and a booster to even go into the venue, and everyone had to wear a mask, and they policed mask wearing. It was at Disney Concert Hall, so...
Many months ago, I purchased tickets to Hamilton, which then got canceled due to Omicron, and I certainly don't blame them. I think that the tickets were when it was like 100,000 new cases a day in Los Angeles. So, but I will be back in the theater for the first time, catching the installment or the
revival.
The revival. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. The revival of Hamilton next month, and that will be the first time. I'll have done something like that with a crowd of people.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully there won't be a new variant that'll be bedeviling us, and we'll be able to go back to something like normal life. So everyone listening, get boosted, get vaccinated, please, so we can do this again.
Yeah, and if you're the person who's been trolling us and telling us that we shouldn't tell people to get vaccinated, sorry. There we are. We're doing it again. You don't have to listen to us. So
yeah. We're not a political podcast, but if you're anti-science, I don't have a lot of room for you in my life.
So anyway, moving on. We had a tremendous year last year for interviewing cinematographers. We interviewed 3 of the 5 Academy Award nominees. The nominations just came out. Ben, who refresh our listeners' memory? Who did we interview last year?
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw. I mean, since we did our last episode, I think last Monday or something, they released the Oscar nominees, and of course I'm like, picture, whatever, who cares, actor, who cares, whatever. I went right to the cinematographers.
That's right, as everybody does. Forget the actors. Everyone goes to. Yeah, okay.
Fuck all that stuff. We're here to talk about the DPs.
That's right.
So I scrolled down, and I was so pleasantly surprised to see that we had interviewed, of course, Ari Wegner, DP of Power of the Dog, which was nominated for the most Oscars of all movies.
Yeah.
We had interviewed Greg Fraser, who shot Dune, and also the upcoming The Batman. Mm-hmm. And we had talked to Daniel Lautzen, who shot Nightmare Alley. We have not spoken to, and of course they are both on our radar deeply, not just for these movies, but for amazing careers, Bruno Del Bonell, who shot The Tragedy of Macbeth, and of course the great Janusz Kaminski, who whenever we get on here...
He did West Side Story.
He did West Side Story, and if we're ever lucky enough to get him on here, all I'm going to want to talk about is Roger Corman.
Yes, he is part of that alumni of quite a few people who've been on the show who cut their teeth at Corman back in the day.
I can't wait to ask Janusz Kaminski about working for Roger Corman. But obviously he's shot, I think, literally every Spielberg movie since Schindler's List.
I guess you could ask him about Spielberg. But I mean, between Spielberg and Corman, most people are asking him about Spielberg. They're not asking him about Corman. So
well, I mean, to me, that's what I find fascinating. I mean, like when we had Wally Pfister on, it was the same thing where it's like, yeah, we could talk to him about making the Dark Knight trilogy, which are all masterpieces. Mm-hmm. But I was very interested to hear about Corman.
Yeah, and you know what? Kudos to him for being so incredibly generous. We spoke to him 3 different times, and we got to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. Not just necessarily like, the big high profile, like, onesie, twosie. We got to talk about everything. It was great. We should do it again.
We definitely should. That guy is an amazing storyteller.
And good friends with Janusz, I understand. So
yeah. I mean, well, we've talked to a lot of people who were at Corman at that time, like Carlos Gonzalez and Mike Mickens.
Yeah, Faden Papa Michael, I think, wasn't he there too?
Faden, yes, Faden was a Roger Corman person.
All kinds of people. Anyway,
so the Oscars are an interesting thing, and our producer Alana Cody also thought we should mention that, like, the way they're going back to doing regular old Oscars this year. It's just going to be Oscars. Last year was definitely the weird Oscars.
Weird Oscars, for sure.
So weird. The way they shot it and everything. So I guess they're just going, I believe, back to the Kodak Theater and doing it all, and they're not requiring vaccination proof, apparently.
So any predictions, any gimmies, anything? I know we're going to do a special where we talk to someone who really is a specialist about the Oscars, but what are you thinking?
You're talking about Janelle Riley, who we've had on for the last few years.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, like overall predictions for the Oscars, it's kind of hard to say. When I look at this list of cinematographers, if I had to put my money down on one film winning, it would be Power of the Dog, Ari Wegner. And the movie is beautiful and gorgeous and sweeping, and the kind of movie we don't get to see. We don't make those kinds of movies as often anymore. And it was just a breath of fresh air visually for Jane Campion, who is also kind of an Oscar darling kind of a director. So I would put my money down on that. Or, to me, the other one that, and we can get into this with Janelle, would be Janusz Kaminski's photography for West Side Story. I mean, all 5 of these movies are striking and gorgeous, and I'm not saying which ones are my favorite because I would never admit that out loud. But
there's a difference, though, between saying what's your favorite and what you think's going to win. Because the Oscars, it's like a lot of people like to vote for their friends. That's kind of how it is. It's self-congratulatory, and people want to see their friends get up on stage.
Also, like a lot of times, when someone's been around for a long time and hasn't had, which to me, that also leans Janusz, who I believe has been underappreciated by the Academy over the years.
It's hard for someone who's won 2 Academy Awards to be underappreciated. He won for Schindler's List in 1994 and one for Saving Private Ryan in 1998.
It's been a long time since he's won an Oscar.
Oh, okay.
And
it hasn't been in the 2000s. It's true. But he has had 4 nominations in the 2000s in addition to that. So between awards and nominations, that's 7. I mean, the guy's not overlooked. So.
Yeah. It's not quite like Roger Deakins, who had been nominated, I believe, 8 times before he won for Blade Runner 2040. 13?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there was that YouTube video that came out that said Roger Deakins is a loser, and then went through like all his losses and the Academy Awards, and then of course he won. Then he won twice. So
Yeah. Amazing. Well, and I do wonder. And actually, kind of speaking of that year, which was 2017, we had spoken to Rachel Morrison, who was nominated for Mudbound, and was officially the first woman ever nominated for Best Cinematography, I would say to the shame of the entire film industry. But I'm not hearing as much press about how Ari is the second woman ever nominated for Best Cinematography. And if she won, she would most certainly be the first woman who ever won. And I feel like that kind of momentum might get her the win. But I also feel like with Janusz Kaminski and West Side Story, that's the kind of movie that tends to win a lot of Oscars.
Yes, I think it'd be really cool if Ari won, but you never know. It's always very there's some surprises for sure, and some mistakes. You never know what's gonna happen at the Oscars.
And not one of these movies, unsurprisingly, not one of the movies nominated for Best Cinematography isn't amazing to watch. All of them are just like a visual feast. I love, the two that we haven't interviewed yet, like The Tragedy of Macbeth, interesting aspect ratio they chose, gorgeous kind of German expressionist black and white cinematography, really stark, really beautiful, really like clean and composed. Like it's a masterclass in composition. And then of course Nightmare Alley is just, I want to eat every frame of that movie. That movie is gorgeous and luscious. The way the camera moves, like it's two masters, Daniel Laussin and Guillermo del Toro, creating something visual. And, I've seen references and things that had similar elements, but I've never seen a movie that looked like Nightmare Alley. Just beautiful throwback to noir cinematography, but with a very modern spin. All of these movies are deserving to be nominated. And if any one of them won, there's not one of them that if it won, I would be like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, Ari wasn't on my radar at all, actually, until just like last year when I saw Zola. And I thought Zola was phenomenal and also had a really, really great look. And so very interesting to see how it goes this year.
Well, and anyone listening to this, if you're interested in them, it's just honestly been in the last couple of months that we've interviewed all three of these cinematographers. Don't know if we'll get Bruno or Janusz on the show between now and then, but please go check those out if you get a chance. I think all three of the conversations were enlightening and interesting, and I love hearing their stories of where they came from and how they got to the work that they were doing there.
Agreed. And hey, let's get to the interview with Kali Reis and Josef Wladyka.
Absolutely.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
I'm joined now by Kali Reis and Josef Wladyka, the creative team for the new movie Catch the Fair One. Josef is the director and Kaylee is the star and co-writer of the movie. Welcome to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. And I got to say, I watched this movie last night and I had the distinct joy of being able to go into it completely blank. I didn't see a trailer. I didn't see any press notes. I didn't know anything about it going in. And the movie deals with heavy subjects like, kidnapping and human trafficking. And I got to tell you, I loved it. I loved this movie more than I can think any movie that deals with these subjects ever. And I want to encourage everyone to see it. Can you talk a little bit about the creative process, how you guys got together and started working on this story?
Sure. And thank you for that. That's such a beautiful compliment. So yeah, the creation, this collaboration, it's been an ongoing thing for, I think it's taken us 5 years to make this film now. And the initial working on the script and the story was about a 2-year collaboration. I first met Kaylee back in 2017. I actually found her through the love of the sweet science of boxing, getting interested in boxing. And I was immediately drawn to her, not just because she's a world champion boxer, but also because she's an activist and there's a lot of things that she speaks out on for her platform. And something about me felt like there's a movie that I'm interested in here and I want to meet up with her and talk to her and just spend time with her. So at the time she was training for a fight. And I drove up to Providence and she was working out of this gym and I saw her kind of get in the gym and spar with these world champion dudes, just sparring. And there was this inexplicable moment as a filmmaker where I was like, okay, I don't know exactly what this movie is, but this is something, there's something here. Yeah, it just kept evolving until about 2 years later, 2019. That's when we shot the film. But I knew as the director and filmmaker that I wanted to bring her in creatively to help me with the story. I wanted to bring her perspective and just get her sense of stuff. And I really learned a lot. It was a very educational experience for me as a filmmaker.
And tell me a little bit about delving into this subject matter. It's a bleak movie, but at the same time, it's also riveting. And you have to, I think, walk a pretty fine line to keeping that balance of your audience engaged and not turning out because of just how bleak the whole story is. And at no point did I ever, except for maybe, in the first couple of minutes, I think I was going to have to close my eyes or turn away. This movie is powerful and engaging. Can you talk about striking that balance between dark and not going too dark?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's a very fine line to walk. One thing that me and Kaylee always talked about was that it's gotta be dark, right? We really gotta kind of go there, but be very intentional with what we show, you know what I mean? And we wanted it to have a very as real and grounded feeling as possible, but also using the genre elements and stuff to pull the audience in and kind of take them on this cathartic ride.
No, yeah, you hit it right on the head. I mean, there were times where, you'd question if it was too dark. And, my mother was actually, because I was telling her about it, would say, and she's like the most gentle person you ever meet. She's like, it's not dark enough, because it was that fine line where you want to, present the realism to it, but you don't want to, because it was entertainment, like you said, you don't want to have people turn away and like really shock them, but we wanted them to feel what it's like, because this is a real issue. This is not a made up issue. So it was that fine line that you had to almost question, is she going too far? Is she not going far enough? But how far would you go if that was you? So it was a battle, and I know sometimes I had to pull it through, but I know it was really good bouncing off one another and having those ideas and having that open platform to really explore different possibilities.
Yeah. Especially there's a version of it that could be very bad, you know what I mean? Like on the nose kind of. And we kind of, in working with the other actors, we sort of came to this common ground where there's like a quiet politeness.
Yeah, it's more creepy.
That's sort of a little bit more just off-putting, like there's like a quiet silence to them. It makes it more scary and more grounded. I think, I don't know.
You pulled it off. No, there's a realism that comes through. It doesn't feel like your typical Hollywood, brouhaha. You really have grounded this movie. And Kaylee, I want to bring you into this a little bit here too, because this is, I believe, your writing and performing debut in a motion picture. And when people talk about movies being execution dependent, they're usually talking about all the people who come along to that story. Can that story, actually carry through, and all these other elements make that story work or not? You guys nailed it so well. The execution of this is just mind-blowingly great. Tell me about your process of getting into the script and getting into everything, working with Josef, and then also having to, you're in like every scene in this movie just about. So can you talk about this at all? Like what this was like?
I mean, it was just amazing to actually be involved in the creative process. I don't know how to write a script, but I know how to tell a story, because just having that creative mind and just being a natural artist from birth, boxing is an art in my mind, and I'm just an artist in so many different levels, and expressing myself is just something I've always done. So it was, I was blessed to be able to work from the ground up, my own character, as well as all the other characters. And since it was my first time, Josef was really good at giving me the education of how it would be, putting me in scenarios. He had me working with this other friend that was an actor. We'd practice goofy little things with his camera, but it was one of those things where it's just like training for a fight. I got to practice. I'm not going to just dive in this without any experience. It might not be the same way somebody else would have told the story from that character, but I really got to build her from the ground up. There was a lot of similarities and parallels with my real life that I was able to use, but things and how I got taught, years down the line, especially when I got professionally taught when I was thrown in a boot camp. But you think it's one thing, and then when you're in it, like there's obvious things maybe that you would think I'd pull from my real life, but that was probably the last thing, because it's more or less you have to be very, very present every day, every frame, every word, just to be in that creative space. And having the trust and the support of the cast and crew was really, can't really say easy, but it was comfortable for me to be so vulnerable in such a subject matter that was really close. And, her name is Kaylee. She has a sister. She was a boxer, but building that character and really having trust in, he trusted me to carry this entire film on my back. And I trusted him, just like I do with my coaches in boxing, to see the things I don't see and really tell me what you need from me. So it was an amazing experience. I mean, things like this don't happen. And again, I don't know how to write a script, but just to going back and forth and like, well, how do you think this person would say this? How would you say that? How would you, if he was in this, that's really, really authentic. And it was really helpful for me to do what I did.
Yeah. And I think one thing also that we, in terms of building the character, what we always talked about was sort of like all the pain, the themes of pain and loss and regret that is going on, sort of the film's touching on. We wanted to put all of that on the shoulders of this character, because she doesn't talk that much. And also, I got to give a shout out to right about 3 weeks before we started shooting, because we did a lot of like working to prepare her for acting, the two of us and with a friend of mine, and working on the scenes and so on and so forth as we were working on changing things as it was coming up. But also I threw her into a acting coach boot camp. There's this acting coach named Sheila Gray here in New York City, and she's an amazing legend. And I knew I had done up to a certain point, but I thought that there would be a benefit for someone else to come in and kind of dial her in even more, and Sheila was fantastic. And so that was kind of the process.
Well, you answered it a little bit, Kaylee, but I wanted to ask you about the creation of the character, because in some ways it almost feels a little bit like an alter ego. Like, you're playing a character who's a boxer, who is Cape Verdean and native. You've got all of this sort of life experience that's all kind of built into this character, but if clearly it's not you. It's a character. Can you talk a little bit about how, creating this new person?
Yeah, I mean, it's a character, but we all have so many different sides of us, and even I can speak a different language, but if you're sad about something, you're sad, and that holds the same frequency. So just knowing that the somber tone of a lot of Indigenous people and Native American people just among us, not even knowing why, that genetic genocide that gets passed down from generation to generation. I've met people from different nations, different tribes, but it's just that common somber sadness that you can see and feel within us. And it's one of those things that is starting to change. And by telling stories like this, storytelling is healing to us. So creating that almost like alter ego, it was almost like I fight for all nations and put that on my back to physically fight. I know what it feels like to hear story after story, day after day, about another one going missing, another one's found dead. I just know that, and I can feel so much of our people. And it's not just young girls, it's older women, young men, older men. It's just our people have been so targeted since the dawn of time of colonialism and since the first settlers set foot on Turtle Island. So I didn't have to search too far. Which is kind of sad to say, but it's so truthful. All I have to do is look in the mirror. I am a target, so I know what that feels like. So I didn't have to look very far for that.
Darren Aronofsky came on as the executive producer of this project. Can you talk a little bit about if that was something very early on, something late? What kind of impact did having Darren lend his name to this make for the production?
Me as a director and still kind of starting out, this is only my second film. So to have, a legendary, iconic director like Darren come on board, it was a very wonderful feeling and a vote of confidence. What I had was, when I was working with Kaylee, obviously when I was preparing her, I would shoot stuff with her, which is a great way for indie filmmakers out there. If you're trying to make a film, if you can show stuff to people and be like, look, she can do it, And I believe the story is, I'm not exactly sure, but I think as soon as Darren saw her, he was like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm in. And they were on board. And then in terms of, he had notes for the script. He had very practical stuff. And then he was really very insightful for us in our post process when we were editing. He gave really on point notes that helped me think about certain things like, like the visual grammar of how scenes are cut and all this stuff, and like what you're really trying to do and how to just kind of hone it in a little bit more. Yeah, it was a great, I'm very grateful that he was a part of the film and that he believed in the project. But again, I think, Kaylee is what really, really brought him in, brings everyone in. Yeah,
it's a cheap person.
The cheap person.
Well, I want to give a shout out to Nathan Halpern as well too, because the music in this is really fantastic, and there's just an excellent score that kind of permeates in and out throughout the entire project. And he's got a little bit of heat behind him right now too. I know he's got a couple of movies at Sundance and a really long career as a composer. Can you talk a little bit about how Nathan got on board, or how you guys came to collaborate? Yeah.
Sure. So Nathan, I mean, man, I could speak for hours on Nathan of how such a pure, amazing talent he is. He's a genius. And I absolutely loved working with him. I want him to score everything I ever do. And if I ever make more movies, I was actually, he had scored a lot of colleagues. I had a lot of colleagues that had worked with him. And my producer, Molly Asher, produced this film, The Rider, Chloe Giles' film, and he did the score for that. So she introduced me to him, and he came and met me at a coffee shop, and we just sat and kind of talked a little bit about the script and what he was thinking. And really, like, for me, I think if I know someone's super talented, I don't want to tell them too much. I just want to kind of give them the ball and then see what they do,
Sure.
And so, we discussed it, not even from a musicality standpoint, really sonically too, in terms of, because we had a really amazing sound designer as well. And we the main thing I wanted to like touch on is how can the score and the sound design sort of work off of each other and sort of lead into one thing. And it was great. It was a beautiful collaboration. He's a brilliant, brilliant mind. looks at the script, he looks at the emotionality of each scene. Like I said, it's not necessarily about references or anything like that. It's really just like, what are we feeling in each scene? And I thought he nailed it. I really enjoy the score.
I think you're being humble. I think you're definitely going to get to make another movie. So
you never know, man. You never know.
I know it's a crazy, fickle town and everything, but something tells me that, hey, look, I was just reading right before this interview that Slash Film named Catch the Fair One of the most anticipated pieces of media to come out, movies, television, anything, to come out in February. And I think that's really high praise because there's a lot of stuff coming out right now. And you're right on that list. So you guys are getting a lot of great critical reviews. I saw that a really, really excellent review for the whole movie. And I got to say, I'm in agreement. This is really something special. I really think that you guys kind of caught lightning in a bottle here. And I really hope that it gets out into the world in a way that people see it. It's so difficult sometimes with especially independent movies. I'm guessing you didn't have every single dollar you needed to make this movie just because of the way of independent filmmaking, but it doesn't feel lacking in any way. It feels very polished and very raw and very real. And I just can't stop saying enough good stuff about it. I'm going to tell everyone I know to hurry out and see this. It's coming to theaters. Did I hear? Is this getting a theatrical release?
Yes. So the film is being released by IFC Films, which I'm so grateful for. And so it'll be released on Friday, February 11th, theatrically and online as well. Basically, anywhere you can buy films online. So it'll be released at the same time, and it's in limited theaters on Friday. We took a big swing, kind of, and it's kind of scary to put your art out there. So hopefully. But it's nice that people are liking it, But as independent filmmakers, I feel like we need that more than ever now. We need bold films that take risks and everything, especially as movies are, feels like they're moving towards something else. And we just got to keep, making our films. So we'll keep the good fight going.
So Catch the Fair One Part 2. I'm kidding, of course. No.
Everybody wants a part 2.
Well, anytime you have something that's successful and has a big following behind it, there is going to be, I'm sure, pressure actually to try to recreate what's already been done. I mean, this movie does not open itself up easily to that, nor, in my personal opinion, do I think that you need a sequel. But if people are asking you about that, how do you combat that? How do you say, what's your feeling about continuing this story?
It's a story that needs to be told, and it does just what we wanted it to do, is bring awareness and ask those questions. I don't think it needs, I don't try to reinvent the wheel. I think it has a bold statement, and it kind of takes you in and rips you back out. To kind of continue something like an episode for episode type of a story, to tell familiar stories each episode or something like that, that's something that would definitely be something, but I don't think it needs a sequel. Something that kind of continue just to bring awareness to this issue and to tell individual stories, something along those lines, because we definitely had a mission with this.
Do you guys do social media at all? Where can people find you, or is there an official site for Catch the Fair One in case they want to follow or learn more about the project?
CatchTheFairOneMovie.com through IFC. Yes, it's through IFC site.
And February 11th, it's going to be on streaming and in theaters.
Correct. February 11th, and streaming on theaters.
I'm very active on social media. I have a Facebook fan page. It's KO-Kaylee, Kali Reis, Reis. Kind of keep that PG-13. I have a lot of kids and elders that follow me. Instagram, I'm on a lot. KO_NDNBXR. Kind of the mix between a couple of things where I, bring awareness to a lot of things that promote my fighting, the films. I'm just trying to keep people, in the loop what's going on. And then Twitter, I'm a loose cannon. Kind of anything goes. Because boxing Twitter is a whole vicious world. It's KO Reis 86. So you can kind of catch me on 3 different levels of social media.
Nice. Joseph, anything for yourself?
No, I've been on social media for a while, just for my own mental health.
I would say your mental health is way better because of that. So, well, Kaylee, Joseph, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really a lot of fun, and I'm going to tell everyone to go see this movie. I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that was Kali Reis and Josef Wladyka. It was really great having you guys on the show, and we're going to put all the links to find you guys in the show notes. So if anyone wants to go to camnoir.com, that's where they can find direct links to your guys' social.
Sweet. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see what they do next.
All right, so Ben, it is bill paying time. I'm going to tell all our listeners here a little bit about Aperture. I've mentioned it before, but they've got a new light coming out. It's the largest, brightest light that they make. It is called the 1200D. And for any of you playing at home, 1200D is the same amount of watts of power like a 1200 watt HMI or a 1.2 HMI would use. But this just absolutely blasts out a huge amount of light, far more than an HMI 1200, and doesn't weigh very much. It doesn't take any time to power up. There's no ballast to get up to speed. It's, it does have a ballast, but it can be powered by batteries. There's all kinds of really clever stuff, and it is finally about to ship. By the time you hear this, Hot Rod Cameras will probably be receiving our shipments, and I think next week we can actually then start sending them out to customers. So I know we've got a bunch of people who've pre-ordered, but you have not pre-ordered one of these lights. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can find it, and head over to Hot Rod Cameras, and you can order this incredible industry-leading light. It's really, really powerful. It's really impressive. If you wanted a 1200 watt LED and had been just, waiting to pick one up, the Aperture is definitely worth taking a look at. It's got all kinds of advanced features and connections and things. And it's definitely going to be, I think, a favorite, because heretofore, the largest light they had is a 600D, but now they're doubling that, which means a full stop extra. I can only imagine really how much light this is putting out. The 600 is plenty bright for a lot of people, but if you're doing big shoots, big areas, you need to bounce things through your frames, you got to take a look at this light. It's pretty incredible.
I know I keep talking to you about this, but I really do wonder, how far away are we from just the end of HMI lights? Because, LED lights aren't going to my knowledge, they don't lose color temperature. They don't have a color temperature shift over time. They don't require as heavy of a ballast. They're smaller. They're lighter. How long till you go on an electric truck and literally everything is LED, do you think?
I'm not saying that on the high end of production that's going to happen right away, but on the low end of production, that's what is the reality now. There are many sort of sprinter vans and 1-ton trucks that are basically LEDs now. And I think as you move outside of LA, New York, Atlanta, you run into that more and more. People who are more moderate sized or corporate production people. I'm not saying that the HMIs are going in the chipper, but they're not getting used nearly as much. And just replacing a bulb on an HMI is an expensive process. So really, it's happening. And the other thing that I'm talking to people about is the death of generators. You don't need as much power, as much amperage for the amount of lights and the wattage you're getting out. Bigger generators are getting used less and less. Smaller generators are getting used more. And then even some people with just giant batteries they're just showing up on set and using giant batteries. And that's kind of interesting.
I can imagine that you would need distro for that stuff, but it's so much easier when there's a battery at the source. And also just think about how much less fossil fuel you're burning in your shooting day if you don't have to have a Crawford generator just, burning gasoline or whatever all day long.
Yeah, it's interesting. The generators aren't going away completely yet, but maybe the size of them is getting a bit smaller. They don't need quite as much. But of course, the high-end Hollywood stuff, there's no substitute for the infrastructure that exists right now and the Gen A operators and everything else. But I will tell you that if you stare into the crystal ball 5 years from now, it looks like a very different place.
And now, short ends.
We have come to our patent pending short ends segment where we talk about our pet obsessions for the week. Ilya, what's your pet obsession this week?
DJI, maker of primarily drones, but also some professional equipment for the motion picture industry, introduced a camera a few months ago, actually 2 cameras. They call it the Ronin 4D 6K and 8K.
Oh, I can't wait to hear you talk about this. I've been kind of following this a little bit.
It's now, I think, thrice delayed. It's been delayed quite a bit, but they're about to start shipping the 6K version. But they lowered the price $400 and dropped the notice that ProRes RAW had been eliminated from the camera. They basically said, hey, we're not going to ship the camera right now with ProRes RAW. We are going to lower the price. And voila, here it goes. No word exactly on when the 8K version, which I think is the one that most people out there are waiting for, because the price difference isn't too much between them. I think it's about $3,000 or $4,000. But when you're talking about something that's already like $7,000, the difference between $7,000 and $11,000, I think that there's quite a few people who want the top of the line. They don't want necessarily the entry level. I have talked to some people who were involved with the early prototypes and sort of launch films, and the feedback I got was not great. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. The consensus really was not quite ready for prime time, and they knew it when they had to, they have their deadlines of when they have to market and everything, that the stuff that they were using for it wasn't entirely finished. So they were doing the best that they could. I am cautious. Look, I'm financially motivated. This camera does well. My company sells their products, and sure, if someone was going to buy it, I'd be very happy if they went and ordered it from us versus other people. But at the same time, I can't give a wholehearted endorsement, because the feedback that I got was version 2 is probably going to be a better product. When they come out, when they really refine this a bit more, it's going to be more interesting. What I think, though, is very interesting about the camera is the marketing aspect of it, because they're really trying to say that this is a Hollywood tool, that Hollywood big cinematographers should be using this because it has LiDAR and it's got, hand controls that allow you to use a bunch of different functions, and it's got a gimbal stabilization built into it and autofocus and all of this other stuff. But really, the people who I think need those functions more than anybody else are probably event shooters. The people who are going out,
reality television,
exactly,
where they're like running and gunning.
That's exactly right. Reality, event, people who don't get a second take. I could see the entire, the team of The Amazing Race diving into this wholeheartedly, and boom, now here's this incredible tool for them, because they are literally running and chasing after, those contestants on that show all the time. And this might actually be something that really changes their life for them. In the sort of professional cinema world, which their marketing is totally geared towards, and they got Eric Messerschmidt, they got a bunch of people, they got Rodney Charters, a bunch of people been on our show to go and work with them to promote it, and in theory it's all really cool, but at the same time it also looks to me like there are so many different ways that something could go wrong. And because it is essentially untested, I'm going to say that the jury's out, and that people should be cautious and wait a little bit. Let someone, especially if you've got a show that you can't afford to have an issue or a problem on, there's so many radical changes that what they are trying to introduce here, if something doesn't work the way that you're hoping it is, I would say it's irresponsible not just to use this camera, but really anything that's untested. But this one, to me, because they are throwing the kitchen sink in there with all these different functions, you're going to want to let some other people mess around with this before you put your name, your reputation on the line on a new piece of gear. And
that just goes with all technology. It is a version 1 of a thing. And when you think about what was the first iPad like? What was the first iPhone like? What was the first, name that camera? How much better was going back a few years, the XL2, how much better was that than the XL1? How much better is every future iteration of a piece of technology?
And DJI is known in particular for having very frequent iterations. Yeah. Look, they're releasing 2 iterations essentially at launch. There's the 6K, which I think ships by the time anyone hears this, I think tomorrow. And then the 8K, which they actually don't have. It just says, reserve now on their website. We don't have any information about when that's really going to launch. We were told originally that these things were going to be in stores. They were going to be in our hands by December 28th. That clearly didn't happen. It's now February 15th. So there's been a bit of a stretch, and it doesn't surprise me. The thing seems complicated. And I will tell you that they pitch it as, you can put a PL mount adapter on here and you can work with PL lenses. But if you see any of the pictures of it actually rigged that way with a matte box, there's about an 8-inch gap between the bottom of the camera where your rods would be. Maybe it's 6 inches, but regardless. And then where your lens sits, which means all traditional accessories are out the window. I don't think that you can put clamp-ons. There's a weight limitation on that, or there might be a lock or something. But yeah, the stabilization function is not going to work when you put big lenses on it. And you can't put any of your, typical sorts of matte boxes and that sort of thing, because just your rods are, a half mile away is what I would say. So
interesting. Yeah. I'd seen Corridor Digital had done a video about that camera a few months ago. And I remember there were things about it like the LiDAR based follow focus that I was like, finally, that looks like the smartest thing ever. But looking at them operating that camera, the picture quality that came out of it, and obviously that was a prototype they were working with, the picture quality was solid, but the camera itself looks a little kludgy to me in that it's trying to be an all-in-one camera, gimbal, Steadicam, everything to everyone camera. And that's hard to do, you know?
I think they deserve some credit, though, too, because I do think that this sort of thing is the future. I didn't think it was going to be implemented this way. And I do think you'll see more people coming out with stuff like this, but I think it actually will be implemented differently. And we'll see, but it's not going to flood the market. Traditional cameras are not going to disappear overnight. And I would say that it's a little bit of a wait and see right now to see how the Ronin 4Ds really perform and what sort of impact they have. Reality television, event shooters, I could see them jumping onto this really quickly, but traditional cinema, we'll see. So Ben, what's your short end this week?
My short end is, and I think we mentioned it in passing on a previous episode, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. And it is the miniseries on Hulu called Pam and Tommy, about Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee. And if you don't know what this is all about, you know.
You were born after 1990, so.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, the whole scandal, I think, came out it was like late 90s, like 96, 97 at least.
I just didn't think that any young kids are going to really be up on it. But yes, you probably were born after a certain era. But yes, it was a big deal. It was a big deal back in the mid 90s.
It was a big deal. And firstly, I want to just shout out, because we have had the cinematographer of this TV series on our show. I believe it's Paula Hadobro.
Yeah, Paula Hadobro. Yeah.
She shot the most awesome episode of Barry. And after we saw that episode, we were like, we got to get her on the show, because it was just one of the most brilliant visual pieces of work I've seen, period, in years. And Pam and Tommy I find it interesting from a few standpoints. One slightly personal. The first movie I ever worked on, Pamela Anderson was one of the leads. And it was before she was a big star. It was a straight-to-video movie. I'm not necessarily recommending it. It was called Raw Justice. It starred David Keith and Robert Hayes and her. And I didn't know who she was. Like somebody said, "Oh, she's on Home Improvement." I didn't, I never watched Home Improvement. Still have never watched Home Improvement. She was the Tool Time girl. I didn't know anything about her. She was perfectly nice. I was in the makeup department. She would sometimes eat lunch with us. We weren't like sharing each other's dream journals. We were just, eating lunch and working on a movie. But she was perfectly nice. It's the first time in my life that I've seen a biopic of someone who I actually worked with. And to make another makeup related shout out to Jason Collins and Autonomous Effects. I know Jason and I have worked with him, and they did prosthetics. This show has a lot of prosthetics. So he had to make the actors look like they're the people that they're playing, and the likeness that they got for Pamela Anderson, the actor who's playing Pamela Anderson, she doesn't not look like Pamela Anderson, but I don't know that I would have chosen her out of a bunch of actors to be like, oh yeah, she'll be the lookalike. And they, with very subtle prosthetics, there are shots where I'm like, yeah, that looks like the Pamela who I like sat around on set with. Right down to like, this character has nude scenes, and it's like her upper torso is a prosthetic, and you would never know. It's pretty impressive. But the show itself is brilliant. It looks great. Like originally I thought it was going to be like super obnoxiously tabloidy. And I guess it's a tabloidy story because it's about, a, shall we say, personal tape that was stolen from Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee and then was released on the internet, and in certain ways kind of created the internet that we all have today. So there's sensational aspects to it, but like it kind of follows Seth Rogen as the guy who stole that tape, who is a disgruntled carpenter working for Tommy Lee. And Tommy Lee kind of comes across as mega douchebag. And in a way, I feel like Pamela comes across as like the most sympathetic character on the show. But it's a show that goes to kind of, shall we say, expressionistic places at moments.
Yes, and kudos to Paula for really like nailing that too. It's like, the show kind of goes between reality and, you're absolutely right, like, surreal perspective. And oh man, it's fun. It's really fun the way they put it all together.
Yeah. And I think she did a beautiful job. Like, it just looks great. I love the way the camera moves in this show. I love, we're now, you and I are old enough that like they're recreating a world from our early adulthood. So it's interesting to see like LA from the mid 90s recreated, which shockingly was a long time ago.
It tells us how old we are. Hey, I got to give a shout out to Paula too, though, because since we had her on the show, her career has taken, it's just gone to that next level.
Shout out to us. It was clearly because we had her on the show.
It was. We're totally responsible here, but she did episodes of Dave, Fargo. She shot that movie Coda, which is getting all kinds of love right now. She did the TV series Physical, which I loved, and now Pam and Tommy. So it's like, Damn. She's busy and cranking out all kinds of great stuff. And let me tell you, if you haven't seen Pam and Tommy and don't know anything about it, give it a try. Try an episode or two. See if you like it. And Nick Offerman steals.
I was literally about to say Nick Offerman with a giant mullet and a mustache and a fanny pack. Just steals my heart.
It's a fun show. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which I think is exactly what you want out of a show like this. Like there could be nothing worse than this show just being like really, dry and serious and everything else. No, it's played with a wink and a nod and a tongue in a cheek. It's like it's fun.
But also, I mean, to me, the other trap of a show like that is to be super vapid and
absolutely, it could go the other way. Yeah.
And just schlocky and hacky about it. And I feel like the show knows exactly what it is. These characters know exactly who they are. They got top flight actors to play every character. And I do think it's actually, in as much as it is a true story, it's interesting to sort of see, and I can attest to this because I was around during this time. It's like the birth of the way the internet is. I feel like that's really what it's kind of angling towards because, this is not really a spoiler. The guy steals their sex tape and puts it on the internet.
Yeah.
in a dial-up time.
Yeah. The first time somebody did that and it was a big story. So, and now it's like Tuesday, another stolen sex tape. So,
well, yeah.
But also, I don't know if the show gets into it, but of course it was revealed there was a true Hollywood story and a whole bunch of people have written about this, but there's no way that tape could have still existed out there without actually participation going back to Pam and Tommy. There was like royalties that got paid to them, I guess, to drop all their.
I'm sure they get into that as we're rolling into, I think, the last 2 episodes of it. So.
Yeah, I can't wait. It'll be fun.
Anyway, so that kind of does it for our show. Maybe we should try and get Paula back on the show and have her.
We should 100% get her back and have her talk about this because I'm sure she's got 1 or 2 stories from the set of this. I'm sure shot during COVID, so it's a whole thing. Yeah.
So who should we thank?
Hey, let's thank editor Ben Katz, who is slicing and dicing and Vegematicking and cutting our words together here so we don't sound completely terrible.
So we don't sound like the dopes that we are. Let's also thank our amazing friend and collaborator, Al-Atrakchi, who created every scrap of music that you've heard on the show. You can find his work at www.musicbykays.com.
Yeah, and let's thank Alana Cody, who put together this interview and many more that are coming up here in the next few weeks.
All right, so we will see you next week.
Hey, thanks for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.